Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today is Tuesday, January 8th. I am Ryan Girardi, your host, and you're tuned in here to today's live web chat with Matt Kaloji and Julie Lawton at Experian Automotive. This is our third installment in a series referred to as PPC Hacks for Auto Retailers. And today's focus, as you can see, actually you can't see from my screen. Let me change that for you. Ding, ding. There we go. Now I have the right screen up for you. So today's focus is on how to identify and track high value users on your dealership site so that you can, of course, push and move more metal. So in just a moment, we'll have Julie and Matt here. Let me do a quick orientation for folks that might be maybe first timers. So this is part of our Advanced Auto Retail Marketing Mastermind series, basically a recurring series of web events like this, where we focus on different subject matters. And if you're registered with this series, you will automatically be invited to each event that we schedule within the series. Some will be like this, where we're looking at a study or a presentation, and sometimes it's just a few folks from across the industry hashing out a few different talking points. So best bet is to register with the series, and that way we can get this information to you ahead of time. Now, if you go on to autoconversion.net and you look under Auto Retail Masterminds and you find this page here, you'll see lots of different links. We recommend that you subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you're automatically notified when we schedule a new event. And you can find all events within this series right here on the Masterminds watch page. And the best part about that is, and this is what we encourage everyone to do, is we put a small announcement up on the page about each event, and then you can comment and interact with other viewers either live or after the fact. So if you're not on the live stream, then you can catch it on our YouTube channel, but you can interact right here with everybody. So I'm going to bring Matt and Julie on. If you guys want to go ahead and start your screens. And I will stop sharing mine and we'll get into a few things. So Matt, Julie, welcome back. It's good to have you here again.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for having us.
And Happy New Year to you and to everybody else that is tuned in here. Now, you might be, again, if you're watching live or the recording, some of you might be listening to this on the AutoConverse podcast. And if you are, I will do my best to describe some of the visuals that we might be sharing. But if you really need to see those visuals, you'll have to go up to the YouTube channel and catch that replay to see those. Now, as I mentioned, this is a third installment of a series, all on your 2018 sales attribution study that was released earlier in the year. You kind of unveiled that study at NADA. And you and Ken did a series of presentations walking through that study. Amy had coordinated a discussion panel that I helped lead with a few different dealers, and we did a whole podcast on that. So we'll be referencing that study throughout this conversation. The first part in this series was on branded search, on buying your dealership name, and there was some good data behind that. And then last month we did the second one on new make and model search. So, and one of the things that we mention in every session are these high value users. And that's what we're finally going to get into today. So Matt, with that said, I'm going to let you really kind of set the stage for today's conversation, and I'll bring up these slides as we need to.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I mean, Ryan, you hit the nail on the head. We've been kind of dancing around high value users for the past few sessions. So, for those who don't know what a high value user is, we also call them HVUs. That's our little acronym for them. It's not a Law and Order show. It's now a high value user. It's basically it involves a number of behavioral KPIs. So basically behavioral metrics that we found in a previous study that we had done tended to correlate really well with dealer sales at the end of the month. So in other words, as we saw dealers increase their high value users, we saw the sales, go up as well. And the same way, with a negative correlation. As they've lost high value users, their sales tended to drop as well. So we knew there was some kind of connection here. And Ryan's pulled up a slide that has some of the thresholds that a user has to hit when visiting a dealership's website in order to be counted as a high value user. And basically, just to sum it up, they have to visit multiple times. They have to look at a good number of pages on your site across those different visits. They have to spend a good amount of time touching the different pages and engaging with them. And they have to look at inventory. So they have to touch at least one vehicle details page over the course of those multiple visits. And the reason what kicked that all off was, we knew conversion rates were starting to dip. And we knew there's got to be some other way to start tracking people who we thought were likely to become buyers at some point. And so that's why we sort of combined a number of different behavioral metrics. And sure enough, once we started looking at those, we knew we were onto something, because we knew there was some kind of relationship between sales and capturing more of these HVUs.
Now, I've had, just because of all the conversations around HVUs, let me back up, get out of full screen there. Let me check one thing. I apologize. Your video is pinned, and I don't know why. One second here. See why yours might be pinned. Doesn't say it is. Oh, well, we'll just go into gallery mode. One thing, when I'm recording these, I'm always thinking of the post-recording and what people are going to see. And folks, that's why I'll share the screen for some portion, but mostly I know you like to see our pretty mugs while we're talking. So as you just explained, a high value user meets certain criteria, okay? And you know that because you're looking at the transactional data that you've been granted, both from the dealers that you're monitoring and through Experian's massive database that it has. You're able to associate visitors to transactions. And you can say, hey, look, everyone that's buying these cars, or the majority of them there's these patterns here, right?
Exactly. Yep.
How often does that change? Is it constant? Is it absolute, or is this a moving target?
No, it is. It changes. The shopper behavior is going to change, pretty continuously, right? It's never going to stay the same year after year after year. So that's why something like the attribution study that we put together is so important, because it captures a good snapshot of at this time, what do buyers actually look like when they're navigating through your site, right? And since so many dealers use Google Analytics, we brought that into the study. That's how we decided, that's what we're going to use to try to track the behavior of buyers, since it's kind of the industry standard, and that way we can help out everybody. And it's going to change. So we, an Experian is thankfully uniquely positioned to take advantage of that, because we're the only ones who can kind of give you the entire picture, because we have not only the sort of Google Analytics chops, but also the entire market data that tells us not only who bought from the participating dealers, but also we can tell if a household visited a dealership site but then ended up buying a car elsewhere. We have insight into that, and we can actually marry up that sort of all that online activity with offline purchases. And it's really only Experian who has all that under one roof, where we can deliver these types of insights to dealers.
So some might say, okay, you're identifying these users that already bought a car. So what good does that do me? They already bought a car, right? So how can I apply that? How can I apply that? And how, and what's the benefit? How can I apply that? Let's start there.
Ryan, I think that it's really looking at what the behavioral patterns are of these people, and then understanding and looking at different segments of traffic. So we're focused in paid search in this one. We can actually see what segments of your paid search are bringing in the most high value users and what aren't. So we can be proactive within the DPS platform, right? That's one of the key things that you've got to keep in mind, is that we can literally look at the high value users across your paid search, and we can literally tell you, oh, based on paid search, you'll be up or down probably about 4% in sales off of your paid search this next month, because it is predictive in many instances, but also using those same behavioral metrics, we can measure it throughout the month. So we can see if there's a portion of your paid search, like your dynamic use, that is failing drastically, or your make model is spread too wide and we need to narrow it in. Whatever it is, as far as the paid search goes, we can model that, and then we can modify it mid-month, weekly, update it in order to make sure that you are attracting enough high value users. So it's using those behavioral metrics and applying it to your traffic. So that's not going to change until we tell you, because we're constantly monitoring, as Maddie said, the changes in shopper behavior. So as the high value user metric changes, we'll also let you know that.
Is the criteria of the HVU constant for every dealer, or wouldn't dealers kind of have their own set of criteria? Does it become more of a custom set of criteria?
No.
Yeah,
I mean, the study in itself that we did before we even did the attribution study. So no, like across dealers, across the country, across makes, these key behavioral metrics that we're talking about that high value users have to meet were significant, statistic, and common. Mm. Maddie, go ahead. You have something to add?
Yeah, no, that you summed it up. I mean, basically, the reason why it works is that it's applicable across basically any dealer. Right. So that's why it was so handy to have as a new KPI to reference, because it really works for everybody. And then as we revisit it, and Ryan, to your original point, things may change, but the beauty of it is that car buying behavior, it follows the same pattern. So as long as you sort of have a handle on that, and we can keep measuring it and reevaluating, we're in a really good place to have a continuous metric that you can use, month after month to measure the effectiveness of any digital campaign that you run.
Shall I go ahead and bring up the next slide that you have here?
Yes.
And what is it? This shows us a bar graph of purchase rate by indexed by source.
Yes. So we go into this a little more in some of the previous sessions. So if you want a little bit more on this, then by all means, please listen to the previous ones. But basically, this is measuring what the purchase rates looked like for the market as a whole, households who bought from somewhere in the market versus households who actually bought from a participating dealer within our attribution study. And so the purple bars are those that purchase from a participating dealership. So you can see, for paid search and for branded search in particular, and again, that's why we got into that in a previous session. But the purchase rates are much higher when you're for households who are actually visiting you through your paid search campaigns. You have a better chance of turning that person into an actual car buyer than the sort of average across the market. And then Ryan, if you go to the next slide, that's actually gets into more high value user specific purchase rates. And this is why this was really where we knew we were onto something really exciting, because no matter how visitors arrive at your site, they had a higher purchase rate when they qualified as a high value user. So in other words, if someone is visiting you multiple times, touching a ton of pages on your site, touching inventory at least once, all those different thresholds that we talked about earlier, the purchase rate for that traffic was always higher than the average site traffic to all of our participating dealers. So, and if you look at one graph in particular for the new make model search, which again, we talked about in depth on a previous session, it's definitely worth looking at. There was a purchase rate of almost 14% for high value users, which is insane. So that means for these participating dealers in the study, on average, 14% of the high value users they got through a new make model campaign bought a car. So that's pretty incredible to know that if you are bringing in more, if you start measuring high value users and you're starting to see more come through your new make model campaigns, I mean, it's going to have a direct impact on your sales at the end of the month. And that's what was so exciting.
I'm going to try to paint a picture for those on the podcast that might not have a visual, but we have here a bar graph. So horizontally, we have bars for branded search, paid search, organic search, direct traffic, email, and pre-roll. And then vertically, we have 0 up to 14%. So what Matt is referring to is that high value users. Now the bar that's in 14% is between branded and paid. It's not labeled. What is that?
That's the new make model.
That's new make model. Okay.
Correct.
So paid search includes branded and new make model.
Correct.
That's the combined. Okay.
Yep.
So the percentage of high value users that transact through new make model, as you pointed out in our previous session, outperforms all other sources across the board when you aggregate all the data. Okay.
Exactly.
And I would say it looks like organic competes with what's next to paid search on the
That
right?
would be dealer search.
Dealer search.
So those would be terms like, if you're a Honda dealer, it'd be Honda dealer, things like that, that don't include your store name, but still include the OEM that you're selling, as well as, it could be just that word, or it could be additional dealerships, dealer near me, those types of keywords.
Okay. And could you just speak to why third parties, it's kind of a rhetorical question, but maybe address why third party advertising sites are not included in this pictorial?
Well, it's very difficult for us. We would really have to be able to, in many instances, pixel or at least implant something on anything from a third-party site, and most of them are really unwilling to do that.
Okay, so you would need information from the third-party sites.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
In order for it to be really clean data, I'll put it that way, right?
Sure.
We could definitely gather data, but it would be really fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
Should I go to the next slide, Matt?
Sure, yeah. Let's get
I haven't looked at this yet.
A little bit more specific, kind of reiterating what we were just discussing earlier. And just to kind of drive home, any type of paid search that you're doing, you really need to be measuring high value users. And the reason why is those last biggest numbers at the bottom of each column we have on this slide. And we have branded search and new make model search. And the purchase rate for branded high value users was 54% higher than the average for the study. And then on the new make model side, it's even more, through the roof. It's 137% higher than your average site visitor. And basically, it's just trying to, again, just drive home any type of paid search you're doing, you need more high value users, and you need to be measuring them. And then, as Julie was kind of touching on earlier, optimize your campaigns in order to make sure you're getting more of them through that. And then you need to clean up the campaigns which are underperforming. And we have through the platform that we have, and all of our performance managers who work with the dealers who are on our platform, we have benchmarking data to help guide you as far as what is what should you be shooting for, as far as the high value user rate for every campaign and digital source you're running, as well as the beautiful thing about AdWords that you get the cost data piped right into Google Analytics. So we can actually tell you, good cost per HVU, and are you improving on that, or are you actually getting less efficient, and where can we start to improve those campaigns?
And Ryan, I think it's also important to know, we've been touting the high value user metric for what, Maddie, 2-3 years at this point?
Oh, yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
So every case study we have ever done since then, about 3 years out, when we've done individual dealer success stories and things like that, have always been measured by HVUs. So, I mean, that's a really important point to make. So it's not just the attribution study, because these dealers had success and we looked at their high value users and made changes based on what was working and what wasn't, month over month over month over month, that they did with our analysts, then we could actually see the difference in the gain in the high value users, whether it was for make, model, and whatnot. Most of the time, it's going to be us telling a dealer to focus on their PMA. And that's really what they should be doing, but that's a whole nother story. But using the high value metric, you can definitely get the most out of your money as far as like effectiveness out of really any digital advertising you're doing, not just paid search, by measuring whether the high value users are coming in through that channel or not. For example, make model, great, right? Like lots of high value users. Let's say there's probably not going to be as many coming through display or retargeting. And the reason is those to attract new visitors. So they may return, but they may visit once in 30 days and then the next 30 days they don't. High value users is the best metric to tell you how many, basically how many percentage points or what percentage in sales you're going to be up month over month over month, and how many people you can predict to buy a car from you. So that's pretty significant, where everybody else is talking about VDPs and phone calls and how many leads did I get. It doesn't mean, none of those mean anything anymore. And I think that's really the point to the high value user metric. Those archaic ways of measuring success within a dealership of how many calls came in and how many mobile click to calls and who looked at map and directions and things like that, they mean nothing anymore. It's really about user behavior and harnessing the right metrics that measure it, which is a high value user.
Yeah. And if I could throw in one more thing there, Ryan, too, about, Julie's exactly right. And in our study, we actually found that those traditional conversions, things like form submissions, hours and directions, mobile clicks to call, buyers actually converted at a lower rate than the site average. So, that means if you're using that to judge the effectiveness of your sales campaigns, you're really missing a huge chunk of buyers who came through those campaigns that are getting, and that those digital channels are getting no credit for that. And that's where the high value user really comes in handy. And because it tracks users across multiple different site visits, if someone came in through a new make model and then later through a branded search or through your organic search or whatever it might be, or even through a referral visit, all of those traffic sources will get credit because it looks across every single visit that a user had in order to hit all those thresholds to become a high value user. And so everybody gets credit. No campaign misses out if they helped contribute to someone becoming a high value user. So it kind of helps across the board and just brings clarity when you need it, when you're trying to decide, well, which campaigns are working for me. And it really, ticks a lot of different boxes there.
Can we back up to your point? What you said is that the data shows that the visitors being identified as HVUs,
yep,
are actually converting less, meaning they're filling out fewer forms and making fewer phone calls?
Not just the high value users, but buyers in general. So even if a buyer did not become a high value user, we weren't able to tie them across multiple visits, et cetera, and they missed those one of the thresholds, every single buyer, when we aggregated them together, they were less likely to submit a form or visit the directions page or hit a mobile click to call button than the site average. So, to me, that was a real kind of mind-blowing moment, because I had assumed buyers, if we narrowed it down to just that segment, that cream of the crop that we know actually bought a vehicle, I had assumed, to be honest, that they would convert really well, but it just wasn't the case.
Okay, so you're looking at the transactions, you're working backwards and saying, aha, here they are on the website, and they bought, but they didn't do these traditional, they didn't meet these traditional criteria of metrics. Right. How did they buy? Did they just bypass it and show up in the showroom?
A lot more will show up through high value users, right? Because a lot of them, because the behavior that they were doing was multiple visits, large number of page views, all those sort of behavioral metrics that we talked about earlier, Ryan. So that's how they're that's really the only way you can hope to identify them for now, because they're just not filling out forms or converting through the traditional through the traditional conversion metrics that campaigns are typically judged by. And even things like vehicle details page views, just by, someone just touching a vehicle details page view in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean anything. So you can't really look at any real single metric in isolation. And that's why that, high value just kind of rolls up a whole bunch of those solid behavioral metrics that seem to tie together buyers across all the different participating dealers in the study. And that's why it's so impactful, because it really, it's kind of your strongest measure of buyers that we know about right now.
But I guess I'm still trying to figure in my mind, if they're converting less,
Right.
but they're still ending up in a transaction,
right?
Then they have to get to the transaction some way, shape, or form, right? Doesn't
Correct.
mean they have to fill out a form, but they have to show up at the dealership.
Right.
So is that what we're finding, is that they're showing a lot of specific behavior on the site and then just showing up?
Exactly. Sorry. Yes.
Not
Yeah,
even
to
a
answer the
phone
question,
call?
Not even, no, at least not a phone call through a method that could be easily tracked through your your web stats platform, Google Analytics, etc.
All right. So let me ask you a tough question.
Sure.
What do we tell companies? Because there's a lot of it
Mm-hmm.
that are so focused on conversion, right? They're like, they want all these just attractions on the website to convert. So here, I hear you saying like, hey, people are buying the cars and they're engaging. But then when you go to a dealer website, it's like your head wants to pop off because the site doesn't know what you're trying to do. The site doesn't know why you're there. And then you get confused of why you're there, and you don't know if you should do this chat or that chat or this number or that number. So
Well, I think you said a lot right there.
I think I did. I'm thinking about, so where do we go from here as an industry, knowing what where do we take this?
Okay, so I think the issue is let's just look. I mean, how many dealerships have BDCs, right? They're measured on how many phone calls come in, what their follow-up time process was, all that kind of thing. That isn't obsolete. What we're saying is that a dealer can't just look at like phone calls, form submissions, and say, I didn't get enough leads, because that's not necessarily true. He will get leads that he'll never be able to work. And those are the people, but that, like you said, and you hit it perfectly. Well, you go to a website, a dealership's website, and you don't even know why you're there anymore because there's so much stuff going on. So all I can say is if a dealer can make a clean website that takes the shopper on the path to purchase that they want, they will be more successful. But with the conversion segment, you can't just look at phone calls. You can't just look, I mean, that's historical with especially the third parties, right? They want to see how many phone calls they got and how many cars they sold off of it. Honestly, that's the worst way to measure anything if you really want to talk about it. They need to start bringing in pixels, and they need to actually look at what other users are brought in and see the whole picture is what they need to do. But to make it easy, you could just measure it by HVUs on a dealer side of it using the DPS and call it a day. And then you wouldn't have to do any of that with all individual providers, if that makes sense.
So I was on the phone with an analyst who's in the retail business, and I was trying to pick his brain about, where we're 2019, right? Well, everyone what's the 2019 predictions? What do we got to do as an industry? What do we have to do as retailers? And one of the comments he made was, dealers are wasting their time by investing into their BDC. That's what he said. Now, I'm not asking you if you agree with that or not, but I'm seeing a correlation here. Okay. Around, because what you're saying is, if I look at what an HVU is, I'm going to repeat the metrics here. It's multiple visits, specifically 3 or more. It's spending 6 or more minutes on the site. And that makes me think of video. So I got to bring them back, watch multiple videos, because that's what, a 30-second, a 90-second video, looking at least 8 pages, right? And at least 1 VDP. So you count, doing a search brings up a list of results. That's 1 page, right? So if I can get you searching for cars, searching for criteria, for 6 minutes or more, 2 or 3 times within a quick period of time, chances are, as long as I have what you want, I need the product. Yeah. Chances are you're going to end up buying. As long as I got the product you're going to buy, maybe I don't need to, bring in BDC consultants and have this process. Not to say eliminate your BDC, but maybe start here with engagement. And is this specific through paid search, or like, do you have other data beyond paid? I mean, you have organic search in there, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So I would say if I was a dealer, I would use my funds making sure I had a paid search company that did not set it and forget it, that they were looking at my spend on basically at least in every couple of day visit view, right? A lot of times what happens is things are set at the beginning of the month, like the keywords and whatnot. And by the end of the month, they're like, oh, rats, you know what? We had this one keyword, or you had that one Lexus on your lot that was in the used inventory and your dynamic used, you know, ate up $600 of your dynamic used. And oh, you know what? Hopefully that doesn't happen next month. No, I mean, they have to get smarter about their digital. In all reality, the dealer's digital advertising is the first face a consumer is ever going to see of that dealer. So, and then their website is really the second view, right? So if I was a dealer, I would make sure my website was clean, easy to navigate, took the customer on the journey, made them land on pages from my paid search or whatever it is, right? That actually makes sense. Nothing drives me more absolutely batty crazy than putting up a new make model PPC ad and landing me on inventory. I hate that. Why do I want to look at inventory? I don't even know if I can afford the car. So dealers have to get smarter about their digital. They can't just set it and forget it. And they need to get very specific on what percentage of their spend. And then they need to measure that by the HVUs. Because if you have, let's just say branded, all of a sudden producing an enormous amount of HVUs, it makes sense that you might want to expand that or go for a higher impression and spend a little bit more money in that area if it's producing a ton of HVUs for you. But right now, the conversation is how many phone calls did I get, right? How quick is the phone call returned? When they say the average closing rate of a BDC is about 8%. I mean, when you're looking at the packs of just PPC make model coming in and bringing in basically 14. A 12%, 14% purchase rate, like, I mean, that's a no-brainer to me because more people are doing that than are calling your dealership. So our BDCs, you can't get rid of them, right? Somebody's got to field them. But I think there needs to be way more attention paid to the customer journey and how you attract them. To
me, it comes down to how you prioritize, right? So what I heard you say is prioritize your digital ad spend, optimize your paid search and how that is. And you've given the framework for that hierarchy of priority. Now, you did say, don't run a make model ad to a search results. I think that's what you said, right?
Yeah. Well, it just drives me nuts.
Because you should send them to a specific VDP.
Yeah. No, like a specific, like custom model page. Like you're going to attract new Civic owners, you better land them on a Civic page, depending on what they want. Is there a lease offer there? You know, whatnot. The DPS can tell you all of that, of what to put on that page, but you better make sure you have the offer there, the interesting things about it, you know, whether it's technology that attracts that user or whatnot, and highlight those things. So it's almost like a model page on a specific dealer site in many instances, but it's not. It's a sales landing page where they give you, you know, the price and if you can afford it. And I mean, if I go and look at Silverado 1500s, I have been in the industry for like 15 years. I have no clue what they cost, believe it or not. And nor will I probably ever. I couldn't even get into it. I'm 5'2". But if I was going to look at a Silverado 1500, the first thing I'd want to do is find out how much it is per trim. I don't want to look at all of the vehicles because I don't even know if I want it yet or I can afford it. So I think dealers, as just HVUs has demonstrated, shopper behavior changes, right? They don't want to be landed on inventory pages anymore. I mean, there are certain reasons too, but not for a specific make model.
Right. You're like, I want this make model, and you want the precise information. So, all right, we're 35 plus minutes into this, and I do want to do a quick closing orientation, if you will. Now, I got some comments while we were talking, and which kind of leads me to a question here, because the comment was, you know, Google is certainly one source of getting traffic in digital advertising, but there's so many other sources. So does Experian have some intel coming out that maybe helps us see similar insights, but from other sources? Is that something that we can look forward to?
Absolutely. I mean, we can, just as far as all the different the whole digital landscape, we can, with the DPS, we can help map out exactly what's working for you there and what isn't. And not only that, I mean, we can help refine every single one of the campaigns that you're running. Just all the market data. I mean, just by following and following some of the advice that Julie was mentioning about, the DPS will tell you what content is going to be helpful for for shoppers in your area and what they want to see once they hit your site. I mean, if you start listening to us, on average, we looked the first 6 months of 2018, the dealers we have in the DPS who are, following our advice most closely and actually, taking into account what we suggest they do about as far as targeting and content on their site and how to optimize campaigns. I mean, they tend to have a 10% better market share in their most important zips than the average. And we looked at, 16,000 or so dealers, because Experian thankfully we have, selling dealer data on just about every state in the country that allows us to collect that. So, there is some actual, like proof is in the pudding here. If you actually listen and follow the advice on these, you can optimize your entire digital spend with the DPS and actually, help push some additional share in your key zip codes.
So I'm going to share my screen and just draw attention to a few things. But while you, after I had posed we were talking, Julie, about where to send people that click on ads, one person commented that they've done A/B testing on homepage versus search results, and they get a better result when they send them to the homepage compared to.
That doesn't really surprise me. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. At least from there, they can navigate their way.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know. Before I close things down, is there anything that either of you need to add for right now?
Well, no, I mean, I just think that there's one thing about HVUs, and this is what sets Experian really apart, and not to like pump Experian, but we have all the data. We have the pixels, we have the North American database, we have the consumer view file, we have all of that. So for us to do an attribution study, or for anybody to duplicate our attribution study, they would have to come to us for some of the data. Mm-hmm. And we don't have a horse in the race, except that we want to improve the way in automotive things are measured so that it's cleaner, more precise, and to really help a dealer and guide them. Instead of, I mean, I guess, I hear all the time a dealer says, every person that comes in here, all my reps are like, you did great this month. And he's like, well, then why didn't I sell 10 more cars? Good question, right? So I think that and says, if you follow the data, and that goes with the DPS, that goes with the dealer in general, whatever they're measuring, if they're measuring it properly, but HVUs has to be key. And if you follow the data, you will sell more cars.
Well, this is good stuff. Good stuff. Why don't I share my screen, guys? We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And as I've mentioned a handful of times, this is the third installment in our series called PPC Hacks, all based on Experian's 2018 sales attribution study. And I'm having weird camera issues. It's kind of getting annoying. Sorry about that. Let's see if that helps it. So here's what I have. We just put up this week how to optimize new make model keyword campaigns to acquire new car shoppers with paid search. That was based on December's session like this. And then you'll see we've tagged Experian on the site here, and that features the podcast and the video. And then the one prior to that around branded search. And if you really want to get into the whole attribution study from a really objective point of view with a couple dealers, and then find this post. Every sale has a story. There's a corresponding podcast around that as well that you can listen to. And that really gets into how this applies at the dealership level. So I think with that being said, we are good to go, and always a pleasure. I find this stuff fascinating. And what else I find fascinating is, hearing from different angles, different dealers. I talk to a lot of like consultants and just people that work with dealers, right? So to me, they're right there in the battleground, on the battlefield, working with dealers on their ad spends, right? So just really valuable data. And I want to encourage everyone listening to this live or on the podcast, put this stuff to the test, right? Get experience, Pixel and platform going and test this stuff out and see. I always say, see if you can break the model. That's what I like to tell people. Try to break it and see what happens. All right. Well, great, guys. Thank you. And,
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ron.
And folks, thanks for tuning in, and look for the podcast edition of this coming out within a week. And stay tuned for more great stuff like this. We'll be sure to get the word out. Take care, everyone.
All right.